Okay. Okay, so here we are again. Game of Thrones Sunday School class, adult Sunday School class. Today we are continuing on through the life of Ezekiel, and we're in Ezekiel chapter 44 and 45 today. A little bit more with the temple, mainly about the priest roles, though. So, and also the land. Yeah, we're measuring part of the land today.
No, I mean the priest. We're going to measure him.
Maybe.
God,
Yeah,
I hope
tall,
not.
dark, and handsome. Yeah. So let's go ahead and let me share this video or share. Yeah, no videos today, just PowerPoint. Okay. So this I've titled this Ezekiel sees the priesthood in Israel restored. Okay, if someone wants to read chapter 44, verses 1 through 3.
And then he brought me back by the way of the outer gate of the sanctuary, which faces the east, and it was shut. And the Lord said to me, this gate shall be shut. It shall not be opened, and no one shall enter by it. For the Lord God of Israel has entered by it. Therefore it shall be shut. As for the prince, he shall sit in it as prince to eat bread before the Lord. He shall enter by the way of the porch of the gate, and shall go out by the same way.
Okay, so the most holy of holies is now being shut. No one may enter through it because God has entered the temple again. Now, keep in mind, this has not happened yet. This will happen after they return from captivity, from exile. And in addition, as well, there's a little bit of a eschatological thought on this too. That once we reach the end times, that once God is established, the door will be shut. No one will be able to enter in who has not proclaimed Christ as Lord. So, so a little bit of an eschatological bent, but mainly it's talking about the coming temple once they are released from exile. So verse 4 through 4 and 5. These are kind of long.
Then the man brought me by the way of the north gate to the front of the temple. I looked and saw the glory of the Lord filling the temple of the Lord, and I fell face down. The Lord said to me, Son of man, look carefully, listen closely, and give attention to everything I tell you concerning all the regulations regarding the temple of the Lord. Give attention to the entrance of the temple and all the exits of the sanctuary.
Okay, so first off, who's the man?
That's the bronze angel.
That's that
the bronze man or whatever.
That angel. But it looks different than the angels that accompanied God when God came to the temple. You know, those wheel in a wheel kind of things. So it's different. So those were considered cherubim or seraphim. So this guy in bronze may be a cherubim. So we don't know for certain, but. Also, you'll notice that he brought me by way of the north gate. Remember what the first 3 verses said, that they went out through the east gate and then it shut behind them. So they got to find another way in. So it's the north gate. And then this is where he gets his instructions. Look carefully, listen closely, give attention to everything I tell you concerning all the regs and instructions regarding the temple of the Lord. Give attention to the entrance to the temple and all the exits of the sanctuary. Because, number 6 and 7.
Wait a minute. You say this bronze angel is the one he's talking to?
Well, there are certain scholars that believe this may be a Old Testament expression of Christ being in the presence, because it says the Lord spoke to him. But we have to remember the Lord is now in the temple. So God, you know, the word Lord there is all capitalized, which means Yahweh. That is that's God. So
the big guy.
Correct. So the man of bronze has to be somebody
Mine
else.
says son of man.
Well, son of man is what God calls Ezekiel in this phrase. And a lot of the prophets are called son of man. So
because that's what they call Jesus too.
Correct. Okay. So 6 and 7.
Okay. And give these rebels, the people of Israel, this message from the sovereign Lord. O people of Israel, enough of your despicable sins. You have brought uncircumcised foreigners into my sanctuary, people who have no heart for God. In this way you have defiled my temple, even as you offered me my food, the fat and blood of sacrifices. In addition to all your other despicable sins, you have broken my covenant.
Mhm.
They broke the covenant.
Right, they were
Okay. Now, God gets very specific with the charges here. We'll continue on 89.
Instead of carrying out your duty in regard to my holy things, you put others in charge of my sanctuary. This is what the sovereign Lord says. No foreigner uncircumcised in heart and flesh is to enter my sanctuary, not even the foreigners who live among the Israelites.
Okay. So we've got a change in thought. Remember when Israel, or when the children of Israel were moving into the promised land, remember God told them to treat the foreigners as you would treat your own. But part of the Abrahamic covenant, which is well before this, told them that foreigners, if they were going to be with you, that they had to be circumcised. Well, apparently sometime in that frame of mind, or in that time, sorry, not frame of mind, but that frame of time, the Israelites stopped taking the people, having the people that they took in, foreigners, stopped having them being circumcised. So, but here it says, no foreigner uncircumcised in heart and flesh. So this is not only do they have to be a Jew, but they have to follow God too. So being a Jew was its physical manifestation was circumcision, but its spiritual manifestation was worshiping at the temple. So not only do they have to be circumcised in flesh, but also in heart and spirit.
Okay, question.
Mhm.
When did it change? Because I have been in a Jewish temple in the past, and been in a mosque and all of that kind of thing. Nobody checked to see whether I was circumcised or not, but
Nope.
I'm definitely a foreigner.
No.
When did that change?
It all changed in the New Testament when Paul and Peter had their big argument.
And that affected the Jews.
Of course, it affected the
Okay,
Jews.
okay. Because, they don't have animal sacrifices anymore either. So,
Correct.
yeah, so that's when it changed.
Well, that is the biblical change that's there. It goes back at least that early.
Mhm.
Peter saying, "Oh no, if you want to serve God, you've got to become a Jew." And Paul saying, "Oh no, no,
Yeah, right.
that's not my God." So anyway, okay. 10 through 11.
The Levites who went far from me when Israel went astray, and who wandered from me after their idols, must bear the consequences of their sin. They may serve in my sanctuary, having charge of the gates of the temple and serving in it. They may slaughter the burnt offerings and sacrifices for the people, and stand before the people and serve them.
Okay, so this talks about that group of Levites. Remember, there were two groups from the Levites, the Elahites and the Zadokites, who they're both part of the tribe of Eli, or tribe of Levi. But the Elahites sinned against God, and what that sin was, the two sons of Eli ate of and we heard about that in the Samuel passage too. Okay. What their sin was the two sons ate of the meal that was only supposed to be sacrificed. They took the good portion from themselves instead of using it for the sacrifice. So that was their sin. And so they led people, of course, they led people astray. As time went on, the spiritual leaders started leading them all astray. So this is coming to fruition now, 1,500 years after it happened in 1 Samuel. So 12 through 14.
Because they ministered to them before their idols and became a stumbling block of iniquity to the house of Israel. Therefore I have sworn against them, declares the Lord God, that they shall bear the punishment for their iniquity. And I will appoint them to keep charge. No, I skipped one, sorry. And they shall not come near to me to serve as the priest to me, nor come near to any of my holy things, to the things that are most holy. but they shall bear their shame and their abominations which they have committed. Yet I will appoint them to keep charge of the house and all its service, and all of all that shall be done in it.
Okay, so God is not changing the covenant he made as far as Levitical rules. He is just reassigning particular Levites. The Levites are still going to serve in the temple, but the Elites, that branch of Levi, their sole purpose is now they're going to guard the temple and maintain the temple. They're not going to be working with the sacrifices of the altar anymore. They have lost that right to do that. So they're still going to serve in the temple, but they're not going to do any of the holy things. They basically get to be the custodians. 15 and 16.
But the priests who are Levites and descendants of Zadok, and who faithfully carried out the duties of my sanctuary when the Israelites went astray from me, are to come near to minister before me. They are to stand before me to offer sacrifices of fat and blood and declare the sovereign Lord. They alone are to enter my sanctuary. They alone are to near my table, to minister before me and perform my service.
Okay, so that's the Zadokites, the children of Zadok is what that's talking about. They are worthy to do so because they remained faithful. 17 and 18.
When they enter the gateway to the inner courtyard, they must wear only linen clothing. They must wear no wool while on duty in the inner courtyard or in the temple itself. They must wear linen turbans and linen undergarments. They must not wear anything that would cause them to perspire.
Cause them to what?
To sweat.
To sweat.
Yeah.
They can't wear anything that makes them sweat.
Huh.
So
Perspire.
how would you like that to be applied to senior ministers now?
To whom?
Senior
To
ministers.
now.
You could only wear linen.
No wool
Sweat.
while ministering. Yeah. And right, and you can't wear anything that makes you sweat.
Good
Well, I don't
grief.
think
Man, imagine
people
that
wear-
without the AC in here.
I
Yeah.
don't imagine though people wear a lot of wool.
So I think they're naked.
Think about where they're at. Think about where they're at. Now,
Yeah.
part of the reason the windows that are covered, they weren't for light, they were to create a breezeway.
Okay.
Oh.
That's why they were thin.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
hello, Miss Ronnie.
Hello.
So yeah, they're reinitiating or reinstalling the priestly roles here, and we're just basically getting a general rundown. We're not getting to all the specifics as to what has to go on the things, the T fill-in on their foreheads or on their right arm, or we're not getting any of those details.
Yet.
They can go back and read those in the book of the law.
Yet. That's going to come right after the measuring.
Right. Verse 19.
I got it. When they go out into the outer court where the people are, they are to take off the clothes they have been ministering in and are to leave them in the sacred rooms and put on other clothes so that they do not consecrate the people by means of their garments.
Somebody may have a slightly different translation there. But you remember Mr. Rogers, watching Mr. Rogers, when he'd come in, he'd take off his shoes, he'd change his sweater, that kind of thing. Kind of the same thing is going on. The ministers, they have to wear their linen garments while inside the holy areas. But before they go out from the holy area into the non-holy area, the common area, they have to change their clothes. And so those are what some of those rooms off to the sides are for, so they can go in there, change their clothes, and then walk out the other direction. Kind of like a clean room in a hospital room. Where you've got those little anterooms that you walk into. They're kind of like clean rooms that the priests have to go into and out of. So.
Mine says they shall put on other garments that they may not transmit holiness to the people with their garments.
Yes, that was the translation I was.
Ooh. You wouldn't want to transmit holiness.
Oh, get out of here. Get out of here.
Well, think about this though. The reason for that, multiple reasons. One, it would make them impure,
Mhm.
which it already does going into the common area, but their clothing, that way they don't have to continue to purify their clothing.
Oh,
Okay.
don't have to wash them.
They have to wash themselves, but they don't
But
have
not
to
the
wash their
clothes.
linen. Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. Until it gets
Get a
dirty or whatever.
Bit
I was
hairy
gonna say,
after a
couple
while.
of years, it'd be
But
rather
the
rocky anyway.
other thing, remember, if they're entering, at least one of them enters into the presence of God once a year.
Mhm.
Remember what happened to Moses and how people reacted when they saw Moses. He ended up having to wear a veil because the glow of God, he had, the God burned. It's what I got. The sun, S-O-N burn.
Mhm.
So right, being in the presence of God for even that short amount of time, they come out. It may have an effect on the garments they wear, and people might look at that a little strangely. So it may scare them. Even though the most uttered phrase in the Bible is "Do not be afraid."
Yeah.
So.
Mhm.
Okay, 20 through 23.
Got it. They must not shave their heads or let their hair grow long, but they are to keep the hair on their heads trimmed. No priest is to drink wine when he enters the inner court. They must not marry marry widows or divorced women. They may marry only virgins of Israelite descent or widows of priests. They are not to teach my people the difference between the holy and the common, and show them how to distinguish between the unclean and clean.
So their marriage practices, their aesthetic practices, they can't let their hair grow long, but neither should they shave it all off. Why shouldn't they shave it off? Shaving the hair off is a sign of mourning.
Oh.
Okay. But they're to keep their heads trimmed. Well, why do you think that is? Any of you ever in the Scouts, when you were building a bonfire, they told you to make sure your hair was out of the way because that fire, your hair would catch on fire. They're going to be dealing with a lot of fiery stuff.
Huh.
So their hair was not to be in such a way that it would catch fire.
I'll be darned.
Okay. No priest is to drink wine when he enters the inner court. Why is that?
Don't want to be drunk on the altar.
Well, they don't want to be drunk, but they're going to be drinking some of the drink offerings too.
Yeah.
Oh, so they don't want to start ahead.
Yeah, right.
It's funny the way some of
Yeah.
this works, but it's common sense when you think about a lot of it. And their marriage practices, they're allowed to marry, but they're very specific as to who they can marry.
Right.
They can only marry either the widows of priests, meaning priests that have died and their widows are still there, or they can only marry virgins from among the people.
That makes me laugh.
Well, but why would you think that would be the case?
Purity.
Well, yeah, purity, yeah.
Innocence, yeah.
But what about the 75 virgins that all the
But we're not
Muslims?
We're not
Well, I
Muslim.
know that, but they're going to get 75. There aren't that many in the world.
Well,
There
they're
is
they're not
a
marrying. They're not marrying them. Isn't that their reward when they die?
I don't know.
Yeah,
Each one of
Maybe
those 75 weighs 500 pounds.
75.
That's right.
there is a comedian out there named Jeff Dunham.
Oh,
He
yes,
does
he is
Muppets.
funny.
And he's got Ahmed the Dairy
Ahmed,
Prince
yeah.
is one of
I
the
kill
guys.
you.
Right, yeah. Silence, I kill you. But one of their little segments,
Mhm.
he's got Ahmed up there and he's saying, if I die, I get rewarded with my 75 virgins.
Mhm.
And Jeff speaks up and says, does it ever say what gender? Ahmed is kind of like,
Oh my God.
This modern world,
Yes.
really screws us up.
but anyway, that's,
Used to
that's a
be
bad
easy.
joke
Used to
against
be
Islam,
easy.
and I retract that.
Talking about the wine thing, my sister told me years ago, she attended a high Episcopal church, and at Christmas, they bless the wine, and then the priests or ministers have to be sure it's consumed during the service, because they can't throw it out. And they didn't have as many show up for Christmas that year for some reason. And she said by the end of the service, that's all they could do to walk out the door.
So they got rid of it.
They had to consume it.
I vote for that
So-
rule.
Yep, I'm in
So in
favor.
verse 23, the priests are also, part of their charge is to teach the people the difference between holy and common and show them how to distinguish between clean and unclean. Why do you think that is?
That's a health thing primarily
Yeah.
because of tuberculosis, not leprosy.
Okay, health is definitely one
Yeah,
thing.
Right.
In fact, it says, I don't know, it's Deuteronomy or Leviticus, about it, that if they get a lesion on their hand, they have to go to the priest and have it checked out and all that
Mhm.
kind of stuff.
Right, the health and purity of the people themselves, but
Yeah.
also think about where the people are at right now. They're in exile. They're not
Yeah.
able to worship, and at least two generations have passed while they're in. So the people that knew aren't around anymore to teach them this. So they don't know what holy and common is. They don't know what clean and unclean is. They've got to be retaught.
Mm.
They got to be retaught it all. So.
Reprogrammed.
Yeah,
Well,
that's a bad word. Sounds like
What's a bad word?
brainwashing, but
But when they're talking about people, human beings are anything but clean.
well,
I mean-
right. But in order to approach the holy places, you must be made pure
Oh,
to do so. So-
then couldn't have been very many approaching.
well, but that we get into that here in the next chapter.
Well, there's a
All right.
whole series of things they have to go through.
Right.
Yeah.
Verse 24, I'll read this. In any dispute, the priests are to serve as judges and decide it according to my ordinances. They are to keep my laws and my decrees for all my appointed festivals, and they are to keep my Sabbaths holy.
Mhm.
So they're going to be judge, jury, and executioner, apparently. According to whose rules?
My rule.
My rules.
And who is
God.
God? Who's me? God.
Yes.
Okay.
That carried
20
on even from the Middle Ages.
25 through 27.
You gonna read?
I don't know if I can. A priest must not defile himself by going near a dead person. However, if the dead person was his father or mother, son or daughter, brother or unmarried sister, then he may defile himself. After he is cleansed, he must wait 7 days. On the day he goes into the inner court of the sanctuary to minister in the sanctuary, he is to offer a sin offering for himself, declares the sovereign Lord.
I like one detail in this when it says, however, if the dead person was his father or mother, son or daughter, brother, or unmarried sister. So not just a sister, but an unmarried sister.
Right.
Well, that indicates that any sister who's married, that the groom's wife or the groom's family is responsible for her now.
Mm.
Yeah,
So that's
she
why it
moves
says
over.
the unmarried.
She
sister.
moves over. Yeah.
And we get into why it may be father or mother, son or daughter, brother, or unmarried sister here as to why they're allowed to approach them. We'll get into here in just a few
Well,
minutes.
is this 7 days sort of like a quarantine?
Correct.
Uh-huh.
7 days was what the purity thing. So every time a woman had her cycle,
Uh-huh.
she had to purify herself and wait 7 days. So 14 days a woman would be
Unavailable.
Soiled.
Unavailable.
When Robert Sanders
Kind of like during COVID.
decided to become a mortician, he was, going to class, and he said the biggest thing that they have to do is make sure they're cleaned because tuberculosis is the
Mhm.
biggest
Yeah.
thing that comes off of the body. And I'm going, wow, really?
Mhm.
I
But,
didn't realize that. So I can see where this
Yeah, I can
would
too.
definitely be, let's get them buried and taken care of it at the minute. Then because you touched them, you have to clean up so that you don't spread
Okay.
Yeah.
the thing.
So yeah. So, but if for some reason he does defile himself by touching a dead family member, he has to offer a sin offering for himself too. Which, by the way, the sin offering is also known as a guilt offering, and it's got another name too. We may run into that here in a moment. So
Or what is it?
it because you defiled
No,
yourself.
no, no, not why. What?
Oh, we're going to get into that. We got
Okay.
a lot of, y'all asked me, were we going to measure anything? Well, kind of, but we're going to do a few cubits, but but most of it's going to be other measurements now.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And so what I've done is I have put a little measurement thing up on here for each verse in chapter 45 that use it. So we may have to go back and forth, but You're going to hear 20,000 or 25,000 cubits. Well, that's 8 miles. You're going to hear 20,000 cubits. That's 6.5 miles.
Mhm.
You're going to hear, what was it? I can't remember now. Anyway, in verse 2, it's equal to 875 square feet with an additional 88 feet on its sides. In verse 3 through 7, yeah, I'll remember all these. So
What I meant when I asked what in 27, he shall offer his sin offering. What was that? Was that an animal or?
we're gonna get into to what the offerings are.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to jump the gun. So. Okay, so we'll go on into chapter 45, verses 1 through 3. Yes.
When
Okay.
when you shall divide by lot the land for inheritance, you shall offer an allotment to the Lord, a holy portion of the land. The length shall be the length of 25,000 cubits, and the width shall be 10,000. It shall be holy within all the boundary round about.
Okay.
You want 2 and 3 too?
Yeah, 2 and 3.
All right. Out of this there shall be the holy place, a squared round about 500 by 500 cubits, and 50 cubits for its open space around about. And
You
from
did
this
chapter-
area,
Excuse me, 45?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
1, 2, and
Yeah,
3.
45.
We skipped some verses, I think, in 44.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
And from this area you shall
Yeah,
measure a length of 25,000 cubits and a width of 10,000 cubits.
Oh, how did
And
you do
in
that?
it shall be the sanctuary, the most holy place.
Okay. So in verse 1, that 25,000 cubits long and 20,000 cubits wide, that's 8 miles long by 6.5 miles wide.
Oh.
That's a portion of land.
Uh-huh.
That's going to be a sacred district. That's going to be, the temple is going to be the center of that.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So you've got 4 miles north of it, 4 miles south of it, and you've got 3.25 miles to the east and west.
Mhm.
Okay. That's how that looks. And if you do the math, if you look at a map, that's pretty much the original dimensions of the Holy Land when they entered the Holy Land. Now, when David comes along, Saul too, they expand that a little further. Okay. But then we get into verse 2. This section is 500 cubits square. That's 875 feet square feet. Okay. Which, what is that? About
8,500 is about a mile and a half.
well, it's 875 feet.
Feet by.
Eight-
yeah, that's-
875 square feet.
Oh,
So,
800.
Well, there's 1,700 plus square feet in a mile, isn't there?
I don't know. Maybe, just under a mile.
Miles, not square feet.
No, but just
Yeah.
1,780 some odd
Yeah,
feet.
yeah.
So about half of that.
Yeah, okay.
And that's to be used for the sanctuary. And what's the sanctuary?
Temple.
That's going to be the temple, the
Mhm.
temple,
Right.
yeah, the temple. With 50 cubits around it for open land. So that says 50 cubits. So that's going to be a tenth of that. So about 88 feet, 87.5 feet. But the way that's going to be, it's going to be on either side. Because remember, the eastern
Right.
gate is where everything enters in. So it's going to be on the north and south sides.
That
So it's-
says all around.
Correct. But around just means to the sides of it.
Oh.
In this
Roundabout,
context.
yeah.
So you're going to have 44 feet of open land on either side of the temple. Okay. And then in the sacred district, measure off a section of 25,000 cubits long, 10,000 cubits wide. So that's 8 miles and 3.25 miles. In it will be the sanctuary, the most holy place. So, so inside that basically half of that whole area is going to be sacred.
Mhm.
And that is where that common and common and holy come into play. So basically, the area we've just mentioned is going to be holy, except on the east and west sides. There's going to be common areas on the east, or I'm sorry, on the north and south
South
sides.
sides,
I'm
okay.
sorry. There'll be common areas on the north and south sides.
So anybody can go there.
Correct.
Okay.
And there's a reason for that, because that's where they'll bring their offerings and things like that.
Mhm.
They've got to be able to approach,
Yeah,
even though
yeah.
they're not allowed to enter.
Mhm.
So we're talking a big area of land.
Mhm.
And of course, that's just for the sacred area. We ain't even got to the land being doled out from to the tribes again once they come back, and because that has to happen again.
Mm.
And that'll be next week's though.
So how many people own land?
Well, you've got a few like Jeremiah that own land. Most of them probably lost their land. And remember, the Levites don't claim any land. So that's part of what's going on in the verses we read, which we're getting into as well, is the Levites are going to be given a part of this land for themselves because they can't own any.
None of the workers own land. They just work for the.
Their sole function is the temple. So verse 4 and 5.
It will be the sacred portion of the land for the priests who minister in the sanctuary and who draw near to minister before the Lord. It will be a place for their houses as well as a holy place for the sanctuary. An area 25 cubit long and 10,000 cubic wide will belong to the Levites who serve in the temple as their possession for town to live in.
Okay, so that's that in verse 5, that's talking about the same area of land in verse 3. So half of that land that is set aside for belonging to the temple, half of that, the inner half, the inner half of that length and width is going to be for specifically for the Levites to live. So they're going to be closest to the temple.
Not to own, but to live on.
To live,
Yeah.
correct. And then in verse 6 says, you are to give the city as its property an area 5,000 cubits wide and 25,000 cubits long, adjoining the sacred portions,
Mhm.
and it will belong to all Israel. So that is going to be basically 8 miles long and 2 miles, just under
Is that going to be the
just
city of
under 2
Jerusalem
miles
limits?
wide. That is going to be the strip of land around the sacred area. That's going to be the strip of land around all that.
But that's not.
That wouldn't be where they put the walls, would it?
Yeah. But you can't blow that up, can you? I looked for some graphs and things, and I didn't see anything that would really help. And I didn't want to confuse y'all any further. The scripture already did. So,
There's what mine has.
Yeah,
I can't get it though.
this is that's pretty. I saw some of these too. Yeah, it doesn't help. it confuses further because what we're hearing is
More wine.
Yeah.
what we're reading seems to be exact dimensions. And when it comes to land, you don't really have exact dimensions.
No, you can't.
So,
It's
it's a generalized thing. Israel is more of a looks more like a cashew, if you will.
kind of.
Or looks like New Jersey a little bit too. The way New Jersey is set. So anyway,
Well, now were they allowed to build houses on this portion,
they
or
would have to.
put them in tents, or what?
Mhm. No, they would build the Levites would build their own homes, build their own houses. And that's where, because they're all tribe of Levi, that's where all their families would live too. So that's why they're allowed to touch their dead families, the dead members of their families.
Mhm.
Ooh, there could be squabbles about ownership then.
The Levites know they don't own any land. They take what is given them. So
Yeah.
I just
Okay.
noticed outside the window, we have a new view.
yes, we have a new view.
Oh, an air conditioner.
There's actually 2 of them out there. So
What's out there?
Air conditioning.
Oh,
so
Covers
can't ever hook this thing up.
verse 7 and 8.
I'll do it. 2 special sections of land will be set apart for the prince. One section will share a border with the east side of the sacred land and city, and the second section will share a border on the west side. Then the far eastern and western borders of the prince's land will line up with the eastern and western borders of the tribal areas. These sections of land will be the priest's allotment. Then my priest will no longer oppress and rob my people. They will assign the rest of the land to the people, giving an allotment to each tribe.
What translation are you reading from?
You would ask me.
That's okay.
Life applications.
Life application, okay. You use the word priests.
Yeah, mine says princes.
Prince. Yeah, the thing
Oh, I'm
here,
sorry, that's what it says.
Okay,
I'm
prince.
sorry.
we have here two different words, but prince is used for both.
Mhm.
Or, yeah, but we translate it into prince as both.
Mhm.
In verse 7, prince is a word for priest or high priest, the spiritual leader.
Mhm.
In verse 8, princes is a different word meaning tribal leaders. So they're going to be the elders of the tribe, is what whenever it talks about princes, plural, in most instances it's going to be the tribal leaders. But when it says the prince, it's going to be the high priest. Why? I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
So
Well, how would the
I thought
people
the
know
high
that?
priests were in that other section where the temple is.
the high priest, because of his role, will be given a special allotment. He'll have more area in which to function as to live as anybody. Or
So that's
as
just
anybody.
one high priest? Or-
There's only one high priest at a time,
Okay.
which is why it in the Gospels, we talk about contradictions in the Gospels. People will sometimes say that. Well, in one place you've got Caiaphas as high priest, in another place you've got Ananias as high priest. Well, it depends on how you time it. They served very close in time.
Mhm.
So
Well, mine has that little area set aside for priest with an S, like plural.
correct, and that's why I was curious why you're saying priest, because it's really tribal leaders.
Yeah.
But I mean, that center where the temple
Oh yes,
is,
yeah.
it just doesn't say priest. It says
Well, all the
priest
priests
plural.
all of the Levites. So whenever we hear priest, we're talking Levites.
All of them are
Ministers.
priests.
Ministers. Okay, priests.
Are they all priests?
Well, that's the easiest term to go with. Okay. They all minister, which means they all serve the temple. Okay, that's what minister means, by the way.
Right.
Okay. To administer means to lead the service. But to minister means to serve. So you can minister in different things.
Mhm.
A good example would be in Europe. They've got the minister of this, minister of that, minister of this. Well, that role is to serve that particular function.
Okay.
So all ministers don't preach.
Uh-huh.
So are we going to the temple or by donkey?
Well, yeah, both maybe.
So the priest has land and he's supposed to be in the temple most of the time.
Mhm.
He's going to have a foreman running his land for him.
Well, his family will be there.
His family will be.
Mhm.
there.
Okay,
Okay, so
Okay.
family works.
all right.
Okay.
Okay, so on to verse 9 and 10.
This is what the sovereign Lord says. You have gone far enough. Princes of Israel, give up your violence and oppression and do what is just and right. Stop dispossessing my people, declares the sovereign Lord. You're to use accurate scales, an accurate ephah, and an accurate bath.
Okay, stop right there. So yeah, verse 9 goes with what we just read in verse 8. And so in verse 10, we get to a different thought. Now you're to use accurate scales, an accurate ephah, and an accurate bath. These are fairly easy to remember in a way. Scales just means that it's in weight. Okay. If you're going to weigh things, the scales have to be just. They have to be level. Okay. Ephah is used for dry volume.
Mhm.
So, bushels. It's about 3/4 of a bushel.
Mhm.
An ephah is about 3/4 of a bushel. A bath, accurate bath. Now, this is how I remember these. A bath is for liquid volume. think about drawing a bath.
Yeah.
Okay, you're drawing water, so a liquid. So ephah is dry volume, bath is liquid volume. And it's a bath is equivalent to about 6 gallons.
Mm.
So 3/4 of a bushel and 6 gallons
Mhm.
is, they hold about the same.
Well, in 9, it talks about
We're not there
Uh,
yet.
enough you princes of, you talking to me?
No, she
no,
asked
okay.
what's a homer, and I said
Yeah.
a Simpson. Okay.
Enough you princes of Israel, put away violence and destruction. When did they become ugly?
That's why it has to do with tribal leaders. They led their people astray. They dispossessed,
okay.
stop dispossessing. You're selling my people out, is what
Okay.
that's saying. You know, you're stop doing that.
Yeah, all right.
Okay, so on to 11 and 12.
I'll take it. The ephah and the bath are to be the same size, the bath containing a tenth of a homer, and ephah a tenth of a homer. The homer is to be the standard measure for both. The shekel is to consist of 20 gerahs, 20 shekels plus 25 shekels plus 15 shekels equal 1 mina.
Okay.
Wow.
Money.
Why the writer does this? Yeah. Shekel is weight.
Oh, it's not
used for
money.
weight,
Oh.
yeah. So
Huh?
we hear here that bath and ephah are the same size, and they're both a tenth of a homer. So a homer, as you mentioned, is going to be a tenth of either one of those. That's what their standard is going to be.
Mhm.
So if it's a dry volume, if it's dry volume, it's going to be 10 ephahs. It's going to be equal a homer. If it is wet volume, it is going to be 10 baths are going to equal a homer. So in this case, if an ephah is equivalent to 3/4 of a bushel, that means that a homer in dry volume is going to be 7.5 bushels. If it's a bath, 10 baths is going to equal 60 gallons.
Okay, this is probably the
For a
nicest
homer.
question you'll get in a long time. This is establishing a measuring system is what it's doing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, what did they use before?
Well,
Cubits.
They had other standards. They had other standards, but a lot of it was the same. Remember back when they were building the first temple, Solomon's temple, and we discussed that big old giant called the sea.
Yeah,
big
the
old
sea, yeah.
vat of water in
Oh,
there.
yeah,
Well, when
yeah.
you did the math that they gave, it came to pi,
Hmm.
because we're dealing with a
Yeah,
with
pi
a-
r squared, yeah.
Okay.
No pie
Came to
around.
3. And at that point, I told y'all they're doing high math. You know,
Right.
pi is not known to them at this point.
Yeah.
So for them to come up with 3, I think it's pretty close to
Uh-huh.
3.14.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep.
So I'm not, I'm not going to say that their math is wrong. But there are some people who say, well, they couldn't even get pi right, so I can't get. So some people just exclude the Bible as a whole because
Because of
the
pie?
measurement.
Oh, good grief.
Because they didn't get the measurement of pi correct.
But Michael,
We can't even.
Get it
Do
correct.
that.
It's
No.
not, it's
It
not
has no
3.14, it's
Yeah.
37 digits long.
Yeah.
More than
Yeah.
that. More than that.
Yeah.
but Michael,
So-
I don't understand something. They built homes and houses and apartments basically and all that kind of stuff. Somehow or other, you've got to get a corner square in there. There's got to be a measurement. Otherwise, you're going to have a God knows
Well,
what.
cubits, yeah, any distance was measured in cubits. Or
So they just weren't
spans,
no
hand-
cubits.
hand
All
breadths.
right. So they didn't do anything. What about money? Because shekel's money, basically.
Money is a little bit different. Shekels is talking about weight in this
Mhm.
particular case. So a
You gain
shekel
money later.
consists of 3 gerahs. A shekel in this case is equal to about 4 ounces.
Hmm.
So a gerah is going to be 0.02
Mhm.
ounces. And then 20 shekels plus 25 shekels plus 15. What does that equal? 20 plus 25 is 45 plus 15.
60.
60. So 60 shekels, 60 times 4 ounces is what? 240
Yeah.
ounces of weight. What I can't.
Yeah.
16 ounces per pound. Yeah, okay, so
Okay.
I can't do the
Now
math.
you know why I'm not an
240
engineer.
divided by 16.
So if you don't get pi right, your wheels won't be right.
There you go.
Your wheels
But
will
they
don't
don't have
wear.
wheels yet. They don't
They
have
don't have
wheels
wheels yet. So I get, it doesn't matter.
I had triangle wheels and it was kind of
That's
hard to
right.
move.
So 1 mina is equal to 240 ounces.
yet. Okay.
Now we got minnows in there. They
okay.
use them for fishing.
Now we get into these offerings.
Shame on you.
Now
Well,
we
this
get
has gotten so ridiculous that if I don't
verses-
laugh, I'll cry.
Verses 15 and 16.
1 sheep of each flock of the 200 from the watering places of Israel for the grain offering and for a burnt offering and for peace offerings to make atonement for them, declares the Lord God. How did we get there so fast? And all the people of the land shall give to this offering for the prince of Israel.
Okay, so for the high priest, this is what the high priest is going to receive. For every 200 sheep, he's going to get one of them.
Okay.
They're going to be, and that sheep is going to be used for the grain offerings, the burnt offerings, and the fellowship offerings in order to make atonement. So those sheep that he gets, one of every 200 that they have, is going to be used for offerings.
But
And
then
part of that he gets to eat. Part of that him and his family get to eat. So,
there are no grain offerings actually then.
yeah, there are grain offerings. We'll get into that in a moment.
Yeah,
Grain
yeah.
offerings were used to, that's that sin offering we were talking about.
Well, 13 and 14, well, 13 speaks of grain offering.
It mentions them, yeah.
Yeah.
But remember, the fat is what's being burned. That's what's allowing the fires to remain. And
Yeah.
so that when they say that those sheep are going to be used for grain offerings,
Mhm.
the fat from the sheep is going to be used to keep the fire going in order to sacrifice.
Okay,
them.
now there's another problem that bothers me with this. Sheep, cattle, offerings, and all this kind of thing in there. These animals had to be horrendously fecund, or they had to have the monstrous herds.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, both. To get
When we
monstrous
get to that
herd.
point, I'll give you all a heads up. We know about Cyrus and Darius. When the people are released from exile under the Persians, they are going to be sent back with all of these things, all of these herds, they're going to be given everything they need and more from the king of Persia,
Phew, these herds must be.
which is similar to what happened to them in the Exodus.
Mhm.
When the people of Egypt, in an effort to just get out of here, were giving them jewelry
Uh-huh.
and cattle and all kinds of things to take with them. Just get out of here. But it's different when it comes to Cyrus and Darius in that it's being freely given in order to assist them. So 17, verse 17, I'll read this. It will be the duty of the prince to provide the burnt offerings, grain offerings, and drink offerings at the festivals, the new moons, and the Sabbaths, at all the appointed festivals of Israel. He will provide the sin offerings, grain offerings, burnt offerings, and fellowship offerings to make atonement for the Israelites. Each of these
It's gonna be
offerings.
one, right?
Mhm. Huh?
It's going to be one animal.
Oh, no.
Oh, no,
Okay, so
can't be.
that comes back to my question. If you're,
Where'd all these critters come
where are they
from?
coming from? I mean,
You'll see. We're not there yet.
Magic.
Here we go.
Santa
Here you go.
Claus,
Here.
Santa Claus.
Oh,
So verse 18 through 20.
This is what the sovereign Lord says. In the first month, on the first day, you are to take a young bull without defects and purify the sanctuary. The priest is to take some of the blood of the sin offering and put it on the doorpost of the temple, on the four corners of the upper ledge of the altar, and on the gatepost of the inner court. You are to do the same on the seventh day of the month for everyone who sins unintentionally or through ignorance. So you are to make atonements for the temple.
I want to be an old bull.
good
So-
grief alive.
At the beginning of each month, on the first day, they're to sanctify the sanctuary, purify the sanctuary with the blood of the offerings. Okay, and they do that by putting it on the doorposts
Mhm.
of the temple and the altar and the inner court. So what is that? Harkens back to the Passover.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's what they're going to observe every day on the first day of the month. Then on the 7th day of the month, they're going to make sin offerings for anyone who sins unintentionally. So they accidentally sin. Or
That's
through
what
ignorance, those who don't know they sin.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what that 7th day is for. What the sin offerings are for. For those who accidentally did it, or say they are plowing their fields and a child runs underneath. They don't see them. The child run underneath and they plow over the child and kill the child. I know that's graphic, but that's accidental. They didn't mean to do that, but it's a sin because they murdered.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what that offering would be for. Or the second part of that, or through ignorance. This applies to those who don't know they sinned. So this could be the weak-minded, those who have mental developmental issues,
Oh,
That's
things like
That's you.
that.
Sound like Democrats to
Or,
me.
Or say that
yeah.
say that person who accidentally ran over the child didn't realize he ran over the child, and no one ever came looking for him. Maybe it was an orphan or something. So they never know that they sinned. There's never any evidence of that. Well, that sacrifice fixes that sin. Okay, so
Even if you don't know about it, it still
even if you
fixes
don't
it.
know about it, you still sin,
It's
and it needs to be
fixed.
rectified. Yeah. Okay.
That's
So,
throwing salt
21
over your shoulder, just
21 and 22. Now we're getting into stuff that Paul was asking about.
In the first month of the 14th day, you are to observe the Passover, a festival lasting 7 days, through which you shall eat bread without any yeast. On that day, the prince is to provide a bull of offering for himself and all the people of the land.
Okay. So where does this bull come from? We're about to find out. But you'll notice on the 14th day, and for the next 6 days, they're going to be observing Passover. So that's going to be an annual thing. The first on the first month of the year, the 14th day.
Well, is there a different offering for each day? Or do they just do it once?
No, you'll see. There we go.
That's what Paul says. Where are these animals coming from? Gee, Jehoshaphat.
It all comes from the people, because it said at the beginning, when we started all this, it said the people would be providing all of this. So,
But I
Well,
bet they didn't know
I'm
it
thinking to
then.
myself here, it crossed my mind. I know in Spain, to find the fighting bulls is very difficult sometimes, because in the summertime, every little town has its own corrida. All right. Here you've got every place all over Israel, including the Holy of Holies area, having these sacrifices and things and all that. They got to run out of animals. They can't produce that
They
fast.
don't have any grass. It's a desert.
That's it. It's a desert. What are they
It's a desert.
eating?
they trust God.
That's what I said.
Trust God.
These cows and sheep have got to
If
be
God
only-
demands
oh,
these,
God.
God, if God demands it, he'll provide it.
Mhm.
Well, I guess maybe they eat sand. Who
Yeah.
knows?
So 23 through 24.
Oh,
Okay.
amazing.
On each of the 7 days of the feast, he will prepare a burnt offering to the Lord, consisting of 7 young bulls and 7 rams without defects. A male
Good
goat will
grief.
also be given each day for a sin offering. The prince will provide a basket of flour as a grain offering and a gallon of olive oil with each young bull and ram.
Now yours gives a specific amount for hen as a gallon.
Hmm.
That's what yours said.
Mhm.
A hen is actually a relative term, meaning in a crop of olive, you would basically give 0.5% of what your crop yielded.
Mhm.
So 0.5% of what your crop yielded.
Hmm.
So if your crop yielded 100 gallons of olive oil, then 0.5 gallon would be it. So in order for the gallon to be right, a typical crop of olives would have to yield 200 gallons of olive oil for it to be a gallon given.
Gallon.
Okay, now another question that comes to mind then, and I think this did happen. If you have 5 farmers giving each a fifth of their crop, or whatever, a barrel, whatever it is you said, of their olive oil or whatever, or these priests have got to be unbelievably wealthy eventually.
No, they're not. That's the thing.
Well, how did it happen? Because with 5 or 10 is nothing, but you get 100,000 people all doing the same thing. My gosh.
Because these things are not for their use. All of these animals are going to be used for sacrifice.
Burned.
They get their portion. They get 1/10 of that as their portion to eat.
That's it.
So, but that's for every Levite, and there's several hundred to thousands of Levites that are serving the temple.
That's
And
still
all
a
of
heck
them
of a
are
lot of
eating of that
critters.
10%.
Sound like a fairy tale to me,
You
man.
know, see, I'm having trouble here because all of this coming in, and this is one of the big problems in the Middle Ages with the monasteries, is all of a sudden they became unbelievably wealthy simply because they were doing certain things at a certain time and accruing more than they could use, and then they
Yeah,
became
yeah,
wealthy and corrupted, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's part of what happened before.
Mhm.
But the idea, right? The expectation is that this is the way it's going to be.
Well, it's supposed to be, but it's not what happened.
Humans always,
Yeah.
Okay.
they always are selfish in that.
Mhm.
So, okay. So verse 25, during the 7 days of the festival, which begins in the 7th month on the 15th day, he is to make the same provision for sin offerings, burnt offerings, grain offerings, and oil. Now this is a different festival because this is now in the 7th month on the 15th day. Okay. The Passover was the 1st month on the 14th day. So this is a different festival.
I like that we don't have guilt offerings anymore.
Yeah.
Well, they're the sin offerings.
That bothered me.
You got to remember power goes over principle now in this country.
So next week, we're going to be continuing the restoration of the priesthood in Israel, but we're also going to read about that river in the temple.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that
I
river.
remember that.
Good.
Yeah.
I want to know where that went. All of a
So
sudden
we'll
it
be in
disappeared.
Ezekiel 46 and 47 next week.
All right.
I thank everybody for their time and
Thank you for your
look forward to
preparation.
seeing y'all next week. Let's turn all this off.
Look at model.
I think you'd be used to these.
Bring on the heat.
things by now.
That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
Could you get